Okay, good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon, how are you doing? I'm Tom O'Mara, the Online Learning Project Manager, working in the Office of Vice President for Teaching and Learning, so thank you very much for coming along this afternoon. For the next couple of hours we're going to be running a seminar, or as Stephen asked me to maybe consider renaming it in the future, a colloquium, maybe to entice people out to come to these events, on next generation learning spaces in UCC. So just a couple of housekeeping things before we begin. As you can see, I recently did my Managing Health and Safety course with John Ring. So in the event of a fire alarm, the emergency exit's over there. There's an assembly point outside. You stay outside until you get the all clear, and then if you come back in, please don't come back in through the emergency exit door. Come back in through the main entrance, okay? Wi-Fi, if you've got Edge Room, you should be sorted. If you're looking for guest Wi-Fi, there are the passwords up there, but I'm looking around and I'm thinking most people here are probably Edge your own people, so you should be okay. The toilets, ladies are outside by the lift on the ground floor, gents are in the basement, and there's an accessible toilet just around the corner. It'd be great if you could use the hashtag NextGenSpaces if you're tweeting about today. If you have any questions, we'll be keeping an eye on that hashtag this afternoon if you want to tweet your questions to that hashtag, and we'll address them during the afternoon. Today's event is being streamed. We've got the Panopto turned on, so it's being streamed live, and that stream should have been tweeted in the last little while. It's also being captured. So after today, we'll have these various talks put up on our WordPress site, and you'll be able to access them afterwards. So if you go back and you're talking to your colleagues somewhere else, you can at least point them to where the videos are. Okay. The running order for today. We have to be finished at 5 o'clock because there's something else happening here at 5 o'clock, so we will be out the door at that stage, and Stephen has a flight to catch as well. So that's the running order for today. So really, without further ado, can I introduce John O'Halloran, Professor John O'Halloran, who's the Vice President for Teaching and Learning in UCC. John, as many of you know, used to be the head of the School of Bees and has worked abroad in universities in Cardiff and in Maine. John has received the President's Prize for Teaching, and he has honorary membership of the Students' Union of Ireland for all his work there. He's also the director of the Quercus Talented Students Programme, and he's the chair of the Green Campus Forum. And as many people know, that UCC was the first campus in the world to be awarded a green flag several years ago. So without further ado, if I could ask John just to open the conference.
Thanks, Tom. Mark Poland is with me on the green flag. Teamwork. And our latest project there is to try and set up what we call the world's first green flag day. I was saying this to Mark, because there are now 83 campuses in 18 countries have a green flag. Tom, thanks for that. That's my e-portfolio, so that's why, in case you're wondering why Tom put that up there, if you click on that. First of all, can I say thank you, Tom? Can I say welcome to everybody? This is really another really important step in our journey. I was down in the last few days in Kerry with the President, visiting a number of our partners in education. But on Saturday, I was giving a presentation in that very fine hotel, Sheen Falls, if you've ever been in there. It's only medical graduates can go there, of course. And I was there for the 30th anniversary of the medical reunion. And Fiona's here. Fiona was even with me. So Fiona, you won't see the same slides today, but Fiona made an important contribution also. And what I share there, I suppose, is the journey that we've been on in terms of our education journey over 30 years, whatever length of time. It was 1979 I first started in UCC. And I was complimenting Mark at lunchtime as the steward of our estates and the leadership that he has shown. Despite all the strains that come on us in all the very difficult times which we've been through, we still have a fantastic campus that all of us are proud of, I think, actually. And I think that's Mark's leadership in that, both in the external estate but the internal estate. To me, it makes me incredibly proud. This is our new strategic plan, and I suppose it's again pushing us a little bit further on to see where we might go. When I was here in the 90s, when I was here in the 70s, it was probably about 5,000 students. We've now 21 today. And I suppose what we're trying to do is to continue to build on that excellence and build on our heritage. And what's exciting for me really is what's been happening over the last few years with the collaboration between our office, Mark's office, AVMs and Ger Cully's team. That intersection between the place where I suppose we all teach and we all learn. Pedagogy is made up between space and technology and students and faculty, all mixing around and trying different things. And the role that space plays in that is critical, and we'll hear lots of other things as well, like light and other things, but I've been hearing about at lunchtime. I'm really looking forward to Stephen's presentation. And then occasionally, and I know Sarah will kill me, but then occasionally you get these really surprises like Sarah Mulrooney and her team suddenly pop out, who's one of our colleagues in the School of Architecture, and suddenly says, well, why can't we do these things together? And now Sarah's got a PhD student, we've got master's students, and then we've got the hub going on in the background. And I suppose what we're all trying to do is to focus on the next generation, and whatever those generation of learners might be, whether the generation Z or if you're a baby boomer, that's fine too, we'll take you as a learner as well. But it does require a different kind of approach and engagement, and that's what's exciting. Tom reminded me, he said that, and I don't remember this, Tom, but last April we had another workshop, and a lot of the students were, or transition year students, and I'm going to see now how many people know this software, the transition year students were talking about streaks. Now, when I was growing up, streaks was something that happened at a match. Usually that was rather rude and didn't want to happen. Has anybody heard of the software called Streaks? Okay, so while we use Snapchat and WeChat, they were using Streaks, Tom, is that right?
So I think streaks are a way, and I'm not 100% sure what that's a way of actually keeping something going. It's
Yeah.
called a streak.
So what it points to is that the bridge sometimes is big, and the gap is sometimes big between the technological connections. I'm not saying technology solves everything, of course it doesn't. But actually, if we're not even on the same pitch playing the game, or even in the same room, then that's incredibly challenging. And Instagram, and I know that those 30-year medical students all use Instagram for photographs, far too advanced for me. But I suppose the reference point for us is our strategic plan, and I see Gemma here was who was responsible for developing some of that on the academic strategy. And in there we say we want to implement an academic strategy to deliver an outstanding student-centred teaching and learning experience with a renewed, responsive, research-led curriculum at its core. In order to do that, then we need to do a number of things. To deliver on that, support our faculty, support flexibility, support technology, and more importantly, to support the kinds of staff that we want to do the exciting things. And I see Jeff Weaver here down here, who's done some fantastic works as well. So, you know, this is a very special place with some very special people. Last October, we called, I think, our first meeting of this kind of scale. We started to try and spark some ideas. October 2016, Tom organised and his team the first Next Generation Spaces seminar. And our own team spoke at that, Bryony, Sarah, Ian Hutchinson, our students, Julian Collette, Michael O'Sullivan. And I suppose what it began to do was to spark interest, let people see the possibilities of what might actually be possible when you start to change the way the dynamic actually works. I was over in Paris 2 weeks ago at the Universities Association meeting, and one of the professors there from Paris was trying to design and use teaching in a different way. And I was saying this to Mark, that we can have all the ideas in the world about moving furniture around, doing all the things, but actually the next person who comes into the room wants to put it all back together again or reorganise it, really make significant challenges. So it's interesting you're all facing up this way and I'm standing here. I mean, that's really not great. And if you want to, I was teaching myself a couple of hours this morning, we just took the room of Sunday and we did all sorts of interesting things. And we had to put it all back together again. And what he said to me when he went in Paris, he started doing this. So on the first day he arrived a half an hour early. So he organised all the furniture and you know, in circles and whatever he wanted to do. And that worked great. And then the second time was fine. But then the next time he discovered, of course, he, like all of us, including myself, was a few minutes late for his lecture. And he was worried because he ran in and said, God, I'm going to have to organise all the furniture. He didn't have to. The students had already done it. And I suppose what that really points to me is let the students be partners in this learning, which we do in so many other ways. Let them be partners in that learning. And I think that flexibility would be absolutely fantastic. So what we captured here is a number of these kinds of activities that we've been doing across the institution, from a basic space right through to a complex space, and the extent of which space is changing the pedagogy and influencing the pedagogy and influencing the dynamic nature of our learning. Not everybody will buy into this, and that's fine actually. I'm not worried about that. I think what I'm interested in is giving people the opportunity to engage in something interesting and experimental. And then we've got virtual reality, and I'm always struck as a biologist that the case control studies that have been done on first year biology classes, that if you do a virtual reality laboratory and an actual real laboratory, the outcomes of the students are not distinguishable statistically. Beyond first year, I don't know. And as we try to grow our student body, which we are going to do with 2,000 students over the next while, you know, Mark and I and others will be having conversations as what might that space look like? Should we build big things, small things, and so forth? So I'm really interested in what Stephen is going to say about that today, and other matters as well. So we launched a call then, and over the last summer, and in particular Mark's team, the AVMs team led by Ger Cully and Killian and John Fitzgerald and Colette and Holt and my own team did a fantastic job over the summer. in terms of looking at spaces. We had 23 applications for the next gen, and we funded 9 of those. And what we're trying to do, we don't have lots of money, but what we're trying to do is to align the things we're trying to do with where the resources are going to be deployed anyway. And what we're trying to do is, I'd ask for those of you that weren't successful to be a little bit patient. We'll try and do the same again next time round. And where we're going to do, when I say we, Mark and Steve and others are going to do some significant work on refurbishment. We'll try and align them up so we can get the opportunity to develop some of those spaces. So doing Cuivon, some of you will know down in Cork-a-Grivna and Dingle, that's one of the areas that's getting significant investment. Fernhurst, William Thompson House, the Dental Hospital, Central Room, the AT Lab, Podden de Boule, the Library Studio, the Orb Atrium, and so forth. So there are many examples, and if you haven't seen that pod, it's up in Q+1. UCC has proudly got the highest number of students with disability, ranging from learning disability right through to total amelia, which is a huge achievement for any organisation to have that universal design. These pods of people who are sensory sensitive and really, really good, although, anyway, I won't say we had an interesting experience a few minutes ago. Chairs then are the next level down, which is that you can actually have high back chairs, so you can again eliminate noise and sound in a very simple way. They're about €600, €600 to €800 each, something of that order. And Colette and others have been leading the charge on this. And Linda, of course, in our disability service, disability service have been really fantastic in driving a lot of these initiatives. Over the left is Tom's latest project, which is the Boule Studio. And that's actually where each of us as faculty, students, and everybody can go in with your memory stick, put your memory stick into the machine, move back, and with one foot pedal, you can just record yourself all your slides, and you can just one touch of a button and pedal again, and just take your memory stick and you go if you want to prepare assessments or assignments and so forth. And I was really struck by Siobhan Cusack, our examinations officer, came down with me and she said, John, that would be really quite nice to do information for students on examination halls and so forth. So this is for everybody, and if we have to build more, then we'll try and build more of them, and whatever we need to do. I mean, Colette has been so generous already, we can maybe not ask her for any more space, but we'll work something out. And lots and lots of examples of things going on here. And I'm just the person up the front telling the story. This wouldn't happen without a lot of real serious actors in the room here, and a huge amount of collaboration that's been involved in that achievement. We've also set fairly high standards in terms of minimum specifications in our lecturing space, albeit a classical lecture space. So AVMs and others have been working really hard over the last number of months, and particularly over the summer months, to actually ensure that we actually increase the quality of the teaching space overall. One of the challenges I was faced with at the beginning when I started in this role over 3.5 years ago, I went into rooms all enthusiastic about tele support teaching, and people realistically said, John, okay, but the data projector doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And I get it. So we've gone back now, and this summer there were, I think, we've now got 23 lecture theatres were completely upgraded to a significant level with variable desk height, so you can bring a wheelchair in, or you can stand it, or you can adjust it, trackable cameras, and the kinds of things that really you would expect, I suppose, in a modern university, but we've eventually caught up in supporting those, largely due to significant teamwork between all our offices, which I think is fantastic. And more recently, the open access computing area has been opened this week. In addition, of course, then we're linking that with research, and we secured funding to support a master's and a PhD student in transitioning to the hub. So what might happen in these kinds of teaching spaces? How might we capture that? How might we document that? How might we learn from that? And then use that to inform how we might use the hub in other areas. And again, that has leveraged fantastic opportunities, because we fund one PhD and one master's. Out of that, there are 2 further masters in teaching and learning who are now going to look at a project in space. I think there are 8 architectural students, and there are others. So this has created a huge momentum in terms of trying to understand how and when and we might use this space. And I think that's really important, actually, and not have a fixed view on it, and actually see how it works out. And those of you will be familiar, this is the hub, or the plans for the hub, which was the former medical building, and it's a very, very significant development being promoted in that area. But again, we want to inform that by research, we want to inform it by best practice, and how we might use that particular kind of space. So I just want to conclude by saying that it's a really exciting time, and I think that we've come a long way. We have a lot more to do, and we will continue to invest on it. And for me, collaboration is key. And I was out in China earlier this year, and I was struck by, and some of you might have heard me use this phrase before, but it resonates in my head when I was just preparing a few notes today. And was a great phrase that said, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think we want to go far. We want our students to go far. We want to be ambitious, and we want to keep pushing it out. So I want to just say thank you to those provided the leadership, Tom, Mark, John, Colette, Ger, Killian, and their teams, because this wouldn't have been possible without any of you. And we've a lot done, but actually we've a lot more to do. So that today Tom has put a great program together to actually share some new things, but also maybe see some new possibilities. So it's going to be exciting. Gorgardicus, welcome. I look forward to very much to hearing what's going to happen this afternoon. Thank you, Tom. Thank you all.
Thanks a million, John. Okay, so I'm just going to rock on. So I was talking to Stephen earlier on, my first time meeting Stephen today. You know, we could give Stephen 4 hours, and I'm sure he would entertain us for 4 hours and tell us a lot, but we've given him 40 minutes generously instead. So Stephen is the Professor of New Media Environments at the Centre for Excellence in Bournemouth University. He's worked on a large number of projects over the last number of decades, and he's a recognised leader in the fields of learning, new media and technology. If you just have a look on YouTube or Google Stephen, you'll find plenty of videos and lots of interesting articles and pieces of research he's been involved in. Stephen, I suppose, has worked on worked with government bodies, he's worked with universities, worked with private schools across the world. We certainly had a very interesting morning talking about some of those different projects, and I hope will be sharing those with us today. So really, without further ado, if I could introduce Stephen to talk about building better learning, learning better building. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. Well, golly gosh, 40 minutes and best part of 40 years to give you, so it's a year a minute. A couple of things about myself, really. I am building learning spaces all around the world. One of the things you learn from... Press the HDMI button. One of the things you learn, that's me in a hard hat, you know. One of the things you learn is that people have very different needs. Every learning space is unique. This is in the Caribbean, built these about 5 years ago, and it's a school, and you can see the direction the hurricane would come from, and you can see it's built hugely strongly. Just the other day, of course, the hurricane came, and the community all rushed into the building and sheltered and survived. You know, so everybody has different needs. I was in Johannesburg last week, terrifyingly rough place at the moment. And they have a huge shortage of teachers at all, school level, university level, wherever. I think there's currently about 31 million children around the world displaced from learning, and even with a ratio of 30 to 1, we haven't got 1 million teachers to fix their needs. I've got a project in Jordan for the Syrian refugees, and they haven't even got any parents at this point, sort of one mum between 4 or 5 families. So everywhere we look in the world, people have got different needs from their learning. That said, you've got the most gorgeous campus here, most gorgeous country actually. I think I'd better apply to be Irish post-Brexit, you know. I'm actually a professor these days, less so in Bournemouth. I'm tenured in UCJC in Madrid now, and pretty cool place to be actually, in Buenos Aires. And of course they have different needs there too, especially this side of the weekend when civil war appears to have broken out, you know, so it's an interesting time. I'm a sailor, I've been to Cork lots sailing, and I just show you my boat really because, like me, it's very old. It's the one on the left, 110 years old this year. It's kind of interesting, I think, because as you walk around the campus here, it's a lot like my boat. You know, it's there's a lot of craft and tradition in this boat. There are no winches, no cleats. It's all done the way we used to do it a few generations before me. But below decks, you know, it's more like NASA really. It's bristly with lights and computers and goodness knows what else. You know, and I think that combination of the craft of great learning and the opportunities of new science make the boat pretty exciting, make higher education probably more exciting than it's ever been. You won't be teaching the way you taught 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, probably not now. And that's hugely challenging, and how we build those spaces is interesting, and yet little things still matter. I'm a granddad. Some of these are my grandchildren, not all of them, heaven help us, and they live with me. Here they are all building little model boats. I'm a great advocate of the maker spaces all around the world, and what you get from tiny kids making and learning. This was a comment on Facebook just the day after that, and yeah, we want students coming out of here that are all those things. Fearless, inquisitive, brave, rather seduced by learning. And that's a very hard thing to design for. It's a very hard thing to build a pedagogy for. If I was to look at what are the things that employers are seeking most, here's perhaps, let's go to, this is an OECD summary, I think, of this is what CEOs were looking for around Europe. And it's a pretty interesting list. I mean, knowledge is still there, 19%. But you can see the other things there. One or two of these, as with this, a lot of people hold their phones up to take a picture. I'll just tweet the images onto the hashtag later, so don't worry too much. But building a space that leaves your students with a clear breadcrumb trail of evidence of their honesty, of their collaboration, their communication skills. You go out to get a job, the first thing the employer asks you, what do you like as a team player? And there's not much of an answer to say, don't know mate, I've been in education for 17 years. Give us a job and let's gamble together. I mean, it doesn't it's not a route forward. So, we're looking for different outcomes from the ones we were looking for not so long ago. If I take the PISA folk who designed the test that your ministers, my ministers, everybody's ministers are driven by, that's Andreas talking to a bunch of policymakers in China about where PISA's going. So, the kids coming through school in Ireland will be looking to attain those outcomes, and will be looking to extend those outcomes as part of their university life. And that's a very different world to the PISA world of 5 years ago, where they just had to know stuff and evidence it and know more stuff when they got to higher education. So we really are, it's a different game, and we're on a different playing field altogether, and that needs different design, different architecture, and different thoughts. And that's what we're here to think about today, really. I can put some flesh on those bones. Here's, I don't know if you use Google's Ngram viewer. It's entirely good fun over lunch. It's they digitised every how many million, you know better than me, how many million books Google has digitised, but it's roughly all of them, and you can search them. So I can search for learning, which you can see, this is the age of learning. You turn on your television tonight, doesn't matter where I am in the world, I'll see people learning to bake, learning to dance, learning to sing, learning to play football, whatever. If I search for education, not so hot. I think the death of education and the dawn of learning is roughly where we are, I think, at this point. And by the way, if I search for learning spaces, might be fun. Oh look, suddenly what we're talking about today is, oh, by the way, if I look for fake news, which might be fun. Slightly depressing, really, because the last peak, of course, was just short of World War II. So you can learn a lot from this sort of stuff. I don't want to over-egg it, but everybody around the world is talking about this stuff, talking about how they build spaces that seduce people back into learning, retain them, engage them in a world where everybody is fighting for the attention of your students. Paying attention turns out to be a business for a lot of people, and you're competing in that new world too. So the gorgeous quad, you know, the fabulous building, the Harry Potter-esque doors, you know, are a part of all this, but also the seduction of tomorrow and the excitement of new learning. You know, and if I was, this is an interesting bit of research we did, last bit of context really, but we asked a lot of people about their best learning experiences, and it's not a surprising list. It's an unashamedly constructivist model of learning, really. But if you say to yourself around campus, where do those things happen? That's quite an interesting design question. You know, I've seen people doing stuff all over the place. I haven't seen a lot of passion and eccentricity. You know, the campuses that I've seen are a little short on playfulness. It's a very starchy, you know, it's kind of, this is higher education. When you're higher here, you know, a little short on fun. And it's interesting, you know, I tripped over some quality assurance folk in a corridor earlier, no doubt been visiting some of you. I'm not sure they were looking for passion and eccentricity, but they jolly well should have been. And it's all too easy, I think, to build learning that is so standardised, so controlled, so anodyne, that we forget to make it. Let me show you what I mean by that. Here's a trivial example or two. I built a school on the south coast of England. Actually, I built it for my grandchildren. I have more grandchildren. And their school was frankly dreadful. So I'm not my judgment. I mean, that was the judgment of the teachers and the parents. It needed something doing to it, and we built a new school together. It was a community project. But they didn't want to use the library. I'm sorry to tell you this. So they didn't want to use the library. It was pretty dull. So we built, actually with I paid for it myself. I built a pretty decent slide. And you get to use the slide by taking books out. You know, and if you take books out and prove you've read them, you get to jump out of the window, you know, plummet down. You know, it's staff development is always a question. So the staff development, you drank a lot of beer and then jumped out of the window. But I'll tell you what, the library is the coolest place on the planet for those kids. But it's not just about fun. This is why it's interesting. What we now know about cognitive processes, we can stick kids' heads in functional MRI scan, functional scanners, you know, and see what lights up, and we ask them to do different things. We know that cognitive mapping is a function of those social cues and clues, the semiotics of learning, if you like. So there's something about the day you jumped out of the window of the library, having read whatever, that retains. There's something about that crazy teacher you had when you were young that you remember the moment they ran around the desktops or whatever eccentric thing they did, because that social marker was the thing that, so if I peer through some of the lecture theatres here, say to yourself, how would that be different tomorrow? If I was looking at my notes as a student, how would I remember, oh yeah, that was the whatever the date is, what are we, 11th, that was the 11th of October. We did that because that was the day, you know, the teacher beamed in from their boat somewhere else, or, you know, whatever they did that was a little bit surprising. Your students are going out to a world full of surprises, and being able to know your stuff well enough to harness it, to tackle surprises, is a huge challenge. By the way, I believe in this stuff so much, I built this in my own house as well, so, you know, we've got slides for the kids, and I thought, because I'm kind of health and safety conscious, I thought maybe the only way you can get down the slide is to climb up the climbing wall, so in this way the tiny ones won't get down, but I failed to allow for the support they get from the other ones, you know. So, damn, you know, even the 1-year-olds up there jumping down the slide, you know. You don't know how good your students could be with the help of others. The one thing I promise you is way beyond where you think it is. I'm building a school in New South Wales, just outside Sydney, funnily enough on the campus of the Sydney University of Technology. We stole their campus for a school, controversially. And I had 227 kids who were thinking of coming to the school with their parents in so we could show them our intentions. And one of the things I said to them is, when you're ready, at what age are you ready to go to university? Never mind cooking or car driving or snogging or whatever, whatever big kids do. When are you ready to go and learn the subject you're passionate about? Of the 227 kids, no child said 18. They all say, I'm ready now, I could go. Said to her, there was a lad in the front row, I said, what are you good at? I won't try and do a fake Aussie accent, this is just demeaning really, but he said, English, I love English. I really love English. I said, so when could you go to college to read English? He said, I could go now, I can't wait. And then he paused and he said, actually, everything I've learned this year I knew already. Yeah, I could have gone last year. Yeah. I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 15, in a very kind of, I'm 15, So he was ready at 14. And most, let's be honest, most of what you did at 24 or 25 or kids are doing now at 16 and 17, why would that not include teaching and learning? And it will. You're in that challenging space where I'm busy. I wrote this for the British government, asked me, this was Michael Gove, David Willits, head of schools, head of higher education, head of industry. They said, Stephen, what does the future of learning look like? By which they meant 2025, just a few days away. And I said, well, I'll get a group of people together. We spent a year, I don't have a collective noun for professors, a muddle. But we got us all together and we spent a year looking at. We said, okay, with certainty, there are three things. This is going global. This is going global, If you're not aware on a day-to-day basis, what's happened to student fees in Germany? They were abolished completely last October. There are no fees left. You can go to German university from anywhere in the world, you will pay no fees. So that's relevant to you because the higher education teaching is all in English. They're your immediate rivals. Kids from England are pouring into Netherlands at the moment for higher education. A private university in Spain charges less per year than a public university in England, about 50%. So, this is a global market. Second thing, we're going to know a lot more about how we make learning work, and we'll look at that in a second. And third thing, the students are going to own it. Look, I'm self-evidently too fat, but at least I know it now. So I know what my BMI is, I know what I should be eating, I'm losing weight, going down, and I know that I've got data on my phone, some of you got smart watches, and lots of ways in health that you manage your own health. 20 years ago, I'd have gone to see the doctor and he said, well, Stephen, you're going to be dead, dead in 10, and 10 what? 9, 8, 7, too late, Now you're looking after your own health. Your students will entirely manage their own learning. And I don't mean within this college. I mean within the colleges within which they learn. They'll do a year in Madrid and a year here, and for sure a year in China because they need Mandarin, and they'll be flitting all over the globe collecting the fragments of their graduation, which they've chosen, the pathway that they've selected. And you've got to win that battle of seduction of saying, you know what, this is a place you want to be. And some of that is about the details. So let's unpack some of that a little bit. Right now, slightly scary. Oh, by the way, as we walked around today, I was very conscious of the faculty structure. What's happened in Finland, as you know, is they don't have subjects in Finland anymore. They've gone. Entirely project-based work. And you know why they've gone, because of this. Here's a, oh sorry, not because of that. Because of, maybe, because of, this will do. Because of this, here's a really boring graph. I think we should see a boring graph at this stage. These are the science scores of kids around the world, and you can see, I think, that Finland is the best place in terms of kids' attainment in science by a country mile. But there's another axis, isn't there? And the other axis is whether kids are even vaguely interested in carrying on doing science when they leave education. And in Finland, that's the least likely to happen. Who's got a Nokia phone in here? Just show of hands. It's embarrassing, but he's admitted it. I mean, I've got one in a cupboard somewhere, but you wouldn't have it now. And the reason is right there. Kids left school in Finland and do not want to go and work for tech companies doing science. And as a result, they've torn up the curriculum and said, project-based learning, that's what's going to... I mean, you'd sooner here. You'd sooner be up here also. You'd sooner be up here, wouldn't you? Up in, Brazil, Mexico. The kids don't know much science, but they're going to carry on doing it for a lifetime. By the way, they've got vigorous illegal drug industry, so there's some science, sort of going on there. But look, there's nobody here. And if you're going to be significant in higher education going forward, that's the place you've got to be. So let's look at what that looks like in terms of design. Let's look at this first of all. Well, the room we're in at the moment is interesting in terms of the space. Let's have a little glance here at the light levels in the room. So we know that you're looking for light levels of 500 lux or better to be able to engage your brain. At this point, you're already feeling a little bit after lunchish, I would suggest, And the light levels in here are, well, 500's a minimum. I checked outside, it's just short of 9,000 outside. So you're in a kind of pool of light here. What do you reckon you're sitting in here in terms of light levels? 79. So there's a sort of there's a kind of pedagogic waterboarding thing going on in the front row here. It would be genuinely impossible to engage intellectually for very long in that level of light. And trust me, it's worse at the back. So those levels really impact on building schools to 750, building universities to 1,000 lux at the moment. And to do that is complex. CO2. Do you notice how your skin's got a very slight sweatiness, closeness to it? Can you feel that at the moment? That's because you're gassing each other with your own emissions. That's what's happening at the moment. You're all, I don't mean, I mean from here, not from here, clearly. Or maybe that too. When you get for lunch. Here's a typical closed space in this is a school, but it could be a seminar room or whatever. So this is CO2 during the day. They come in and kids, hopefully they start breathing. You kind of shoot for that, I guess. And here's break, and you can see by the time we get to break, we're over well over 3,000 parts per million. Your concentration starts to be damaged at 2.2. So I'll put the line on there for you. Make it easy because you're already mid-soporific, And then they go out for break, the door opens, CO2 hangs around, it's a heavy gas, very patient gas. They come back in, they carry on breathing. By the time we get to lunchtime, we're over 4,000 parts per million. And even when they go out for lunch and come back and open the windows because they've been running around in the playground, it's still at a damaging level. So looking at that day in the life of a learner, the only time when they were able to properly focus, even if the light was good enough, was that little moment before 10 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, I was waiting for the first person in here to yawn because I bet with myself it would be less than half an hour to be so well done. And the rest of you will be stifling a yawn at this point because the heat is also not conducive to learning. 17 to 21 degrees, optimal for learning. Every degree over 21, your brain starts to slip away. And it's a straight line. Every degree it gets worse. So this is all quite good fun. What does that look like in terms of buildings when we build them? Let me show you a couple. Here's building I've built in, well, we've built, say hi, I just, all I did was bring in our learnometer data. If you want to see more of that data, go to learnometer.net. It's a GIST funded research program. We're looking at humidity and all the other components of all this as well, and it's pretty horrific. If you want to scare yourself, just go into your examination rooms and measure the difference between one side of the room and the other, and say to yourself, how am I going to explain to students and their parents that by sitting a child over there and not over there, they've probably dropped 3% on the exam paper for sure. And on what's supposed to be a level playing field, you know, if you're sitting over there by the light and you're sitting over here in the dark, you drop 3%, and what 3% doesn't quite get you on the PhD program you'd want to, which doesn't quite get you the job you'd hope for, which diminishes your income stream and indeed your children's income stream. So not unreasonably you'd sue for what, I don't know, 10 million, something like that, because they sat you on the gloomy side of the classroom. This is hugely impacting stuff, hugely so. And so this is a lovely building. This is a building built around that learnometer data. One of the real surprises looking around here, these wonderful spaces you've got, the boom ground floor with those huge corridors and the atrium outside, completely unused. You know, if you were to say, Stephen, have a faculty, where would you like to put it? I would put it there. You've got light pouring through from skylights in the ceiling, but some silly person has painted it all, as far as I can see, dark grey, and the bits they haven't painted dark grey, they seem to have imported it all from the local hospital. They're sort of hideously institutional, creamy, greeny yuck, you know, and they've taken all the furniture away, so all you can do is walk around and feel suicidal, I would suggest, you know. But potentially as a space for learning, wow. So you can have little pop-up spaces, you can just say, look, this is the atrium, and it's that bright because we put a huge hole in the roof to let the light in, and it's pretty gorgeous. And look here, this is not a faculty building, this is a fusion building, so all faculties share it. You can't timetable it, but you can book it. So if I look down here, I can see our Vice-Chancellor here having a meeting with somebody. I can see one of those little quiet booths that you've very sensibly put in, you know. I call them spaces for weeping. I think even when you have opened the plan, you have to have a place to go and cry, you know. You need to be able to shut the door, you know. There are folk down here having lunch, you know, and all in the same space. And no parallel spaces at all. Just had lunch, best higher education lunch I've had in a decade, I think, outside of Spain. And what a noisy room we were in, because windows here and parallel to the windows a concrete wall and sound bouncing backs and forwards like a ping pong ball, you know. With no parallel surfaces in this building at all, and the vertical surfaces are all clad with wood to keep the sound down, you know, and well, you just roof terraces so we can get fresh air. It's just the most gorgeous space, you know. Skype bars so you can sit at a desk and Skype to other people around the world, because it's a global world we're in of higher education. Crucially, and some traditional lecture theatres, but mostly these turn and learn theatres. So you have a set of terraces, chairs on each terrace, you sit around the table, people on the front, pivot and look, you deliver 20 minutes of a lecture, then you say, right, talk to each other, they spin round and they have a little seminar together, then they spin back. Turn and learn works really, really well. Universities all over the world, you know. And, well, you've seen enough of that. Now, it's worth also saying, how do we get it to be this good? And, gosh, I'm keeping my eye on the time here as much as I can. Well, one way is to get the kids to design it themselves. So here's a group of kids who design their own space, and I'm going to take you on a little narrative path with these kids. So probably the best way to start is to hear from them about the kind of interesting. To hear from them about the space they've designed and why they think the university space ought to be like it. So here they go. I made this little video for university vice-chancellors who I thought needed to be scared a bit, really, I think. So these kids, by the way, and just before we start, these kids, by the way, it was a 3-year project, and the first year they won a prize to make over their own learning space, £20,000, a lot of money, and they spent 2 years making it over. They won the prize by saying, we haven't got a clue what we're going to do. We're going to spend a year researching. You never ask learners for their opinion, ask them for their research. And well, here they are speaking. Here they are not speaking. Oh, we get the volume, here we are. Oh, bear with me a moment.
So it was designed by people who are going to use it.
Sorry, that's, if you're going to run the sound on your laptop, you'll actually use the microphone.
Can I do it through the HDMI sound? Or is that? Okay, well, let me use the microphone, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's highly fun. This will work. Of course it will.
So I give the group work. So if we just want to move to our own space in the classroom and we need someone to write on
Can you hear that?
paper and pen, and we can just get one of the board pens and write things down.
I love the coloured light. Does the coloured light change during the day? How does that
Yeah, they're mood lights, so they can change themselves and we can change the settings.
You can set different mood colours. Do you think we'll get spaces like this in university?
But I think universities would have probably thought more about that because they're more experienced of students, maybe they're bigger and there's more students so they have more opinions.
I know that when I go to university there's going to be like a range of different types of learning styles, and I'll be able to choose the styles that I like to learn in, and it'll be more independent. It'll be much different from like traditional secondary school.
Do you think you'd have...
Oh, what are we? Now he's really interesting, young Yera, because we're still tracking these kids. So this is our 10-year research program. We're tracking them right on through. As an EBD class, when we picked them up, their results were pretty grim when we started with them. You can see them here. That lad who just spoke is a hetero, second on the left. You can see he came in. He was attending 2 days a week, and he was well, pretty crap really. And then the project started at year 8. You can see suddenly he's gifted and talented, the school thing, and he leaves with a fistful of A's and B's, turned down a place at Imperial College in London, who wanted him because he was black and poor, and you know, he ticked all their boxes. And one kid went to Loughborough, and he went to Loughborough because he was hugely excited by their learning style. He's excited by their learning style because sport has got into learning in a really big way, and I just need to show you this very quickly. This is work I'm doing with, I work with all the British Olympic sports, not all of them, not field and track, but all the others, working with the elite coaches on their teaching and learning for their athletes. This was a hockey training centre, and you've seen it's not great, you know. It's got a projector and a bunch of seats facing the same way, and they never wanted to go in there. This was the, this is the space now, and you know, they've got tiered seating around the edges, they've got a hockey pitch on the floor, they've got writable walls, they've got screens everywhere, they've got zones, where they considered zones so you do different sorts of learning. So within the one space, you're doing presentation, collaboration, research, head down, getting focused. They can't wait to get in the room now. And if you follow hockey, you'll know that during the summer, this summer, they won 3 key matches on set pieces that came straight off that floor. So, yeah, of course, I know some of you here follow rugby a little. So I'm working with the England rugby team as well. If you follow rugby, you'll know who this is. If you don't care, do you? So sport is really into all this stuff in a big way, because what we've learned from sport is that every tiny detail matters. And now this gets really interesting because, correct, in the last 5 minutes or so, because, oh, thank you, it's kind. So we took those children who made over their own classrooms in West London. We took them connected them to Spain, and we asked a bunch of kids in Spain to build their own classrooms, and of course they did. And so I'll give the English version of this, I guess. And here were the classrooms they made over, and we gave them a budget. These kids here For example, we gave them a budget of 500 euros total. And when they opened it, which was the day I took these photos, they gave me back 100 euros and said, we didn't need all the money, and we're proud to have done it to a tight budget. But what was interesting was after those spaces that they'd made over, they were so effective that their schools were transformed. These are the schools now, made over as a result of their learning. I'll tweet the link to this website, go and listen to the teachers talking about what's happened, and you'll be, but I didn't want to show you that for that reason. I wanted to show you because they knew that in each area of their learning they needed protocols. So how do we use the spaces? How do I use the collaborative space? How do I use the relaxed space? And they wrote the protocols. And that turned out to be key when we built Wesley College in Western Australia. We started off with a user manual of how to teach and learn in those spaces. So we thought, which I wrote with my two daughters, who are both teachers by the way, and we started off by talking about zoning, and then we talked about getting an agreed vocabulary, which is something I think I'll have to think really hard about, here, having a common vocabulary so everybody uses the same. When we did it in the Caribbean, we did t-shirts with the right words printed upside down on the t-shirt so you could look down, see what, never say open plan, always say agile, that kind of stuff, And we talked about the role of the learner voice, and we said how does a family learning table work? What do we do with tiered seating and so on? And then we built in Wesley this pretty extraordinary space, which was a new science space, which was, and I know you're thinking about a science block here, 3 floors, media walls, all right, every surface is right on every window, every wall, everywhere, hydroponic walls. If you're building a science centre, the science centre itself has to be a science artefact. It has to be a science object in its own right, displaying its own data and waking your mind up to that excitement. Well, we took all that, and we took the kids from the Spanish project and we wheeled them in to the university, and we said, you know what, we would really quite like it if you would make over a space in the university to be a space you would like to come to as students. And we gave them a budget, so here they are. The space is pretty crap, it's an old warehouse. And we gave them a lot of cardboard in 2 days and their experience, and here they are. The wiring was lethal. And here they are making a cardboard replica of their space and saying, this is what we think you're going to need. We think you're going to need a Harkness table because we use those and they work really well as a place for conversation, a place for quiet learning. We think you're going to need a presentation wall at the end. We think you're going to need, oh, by the way, because they did a model of it in SketchUp, so our architects have got something to copy, and you're going to need a glass wall, and you're going to need a maker space, because how would you do anything without 3D printers and laser cutters and all the basic tools of learning everywhere? And there's the glass wall. They modelled the whole thing in cardboard, and we're now in the throes of building that. The total budget for the entire makeover is incredibly small. We're going to have spent about 200,000 on the whole thing, and when we got a group of architects to quote us, they quoted us 8 million, so there's quite a saving, but it will be better. It will be better, and I'll tweet for you a little 3D image of the space we're building, you can see. But that detail thing, here's just a sense of how important the detail is. This is some of the walls inside. What the students did was paint the walls with different paints, because they know, how do we get the lux levels up? And they realised if they painted with, this wall here is painted with Dulux space and light paint, which has a 34% higher refraction rate, so the light bounce. So if you painted this wall with Dulux space and light paint white, the light, you'd be at more than 500 there now. And so that's space and light. That's the wall as it was traditionally. The one in the corner is 1 coat of emulsion. The next bit is 2 coats, and the one after that is 3 coats. But you can see which is the bright wall and all that. So the detail really, really matters here. And probably ought to leave you with 2, 3 tiny things. We just got to visit 5 minutes more. I'm all right. I'm still in track. So here are 3 interesting projects then that I think challenge us a little to think about how all this is going to be. The first one, I think, is a really quite cool little project. I'm building a new school at the moment. It has no building. I don't know, you've got a vigorous online program, a lot of online students, but thinking about how that works around the world is really interesting. This school, scholarliberum.org, if you want to go and look at it, it's funded by the English government free school program. The students teach each other, and they teach each other in their own houses. So you 5 in the front row will go to sit with each other. I'm there as a dad on the Monday, you're there on Tuesday, you're there Thursday. We don't have to give up our job to be there to look after the kids. They get on, they learn from each other. There's mixed age teaching going on. It really, really, really works. You know, I haven't seen a lot of mixed age teaching going on here. I haven't seen enough of young kids and older people all mixing together. Very, very horizontal. You're going to have to be very, very vertical. And that's a very big design challenge. So the second project is quite interesting, I think, is this one. This is a master's degree. We're just in the process of validating, but you'll see that it's a degree you never leave. So you join the degree. I was walking around with Tom, he was showing me G19 and building, room he'd been in as a student, saying, God, it's cool, With this degree you never leave. And I think you'll find that higher education is moving towards a model of membership rather than just accreditation. You belong to things. You don't turn up, get your certificate and go. You turn up, you have a good feeling about the longevity of your relationship with a place. And that is what you're buying into. You're belonging to the family that is your campus and your students, whether you're here or not. And this is a really interesting thing. We've done a mass of focus groups and online surveys and so on. The big shock for us was, with this, 3/4 of the people who've applied to do it have already got a master's or better. And they said, you know what, I really enjoyed doing my master's. I don't want to go on and do a PhD, I love that level of conversation. Don't want to ever finish, just want to keep going. And by the way, there's no fees on this, it's a gym membership, so you pay a monthly fee to be on the course, and it's as simple as that. About €15 a month, by the way. So this is a whole new world you're coming into. But the reason I'm showing it to you is because the signification you've got, the cues and clues of membership and family and community are probably stronger here than most universities in the world. And that really, really, really matters. So you've got to be so careful as you move into this 3rd millennium. Remember, from next year onwards, every child in school in Europe was born in this millennium, and every teacher was born in the last millennium. So it's a really interesting little moment for us, As you move into working with the children who are of this millennium, you've got to be so careful not to lose the value and the signification of the provenance of your history, not as an artifact, but as something to belong to and be a member of. And I'll perhaps leave you with this lovely image on the door of one of the schools in Madrid, which I'm rather fond of, I think. And it says this, it's a permanent sign. And it says, we're never going to finish. And one of the things, walking around with Tom, we kept looking at buildings that have been finished and, get out of that mindset. Every building, every room, every scrap of furniture, every carpet will never be finished. Ask yourself the question every day, every hour, every minute, how can my learners make this a better place? And you're those learners too, of course. We've gone from doing this to our students, through co-constructing with them, to using their voice to determine where we're going with our wisdom and our history. And that's a new place to be, and very exciting indeed. You've got all the components, you've got the 3-sided spaces, you've got the little booths, you've got the rich media background, you've got the imagination, you've just got to make it pervasive and playful and seductive and engaging. And that ain't so hard, is it really? I'll stop there. I'm here all day. You can chat all about this. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm kind of sorry now, Stephen, that we limited you to 40 minutes. Apologies for that.
I can do a fortnight, so you know.
Absolutely. I think it's great that Stephen's going to be tweeting some of those images. I see this really as, you know, it's a continuation of the conversation from last year. So please keep an eye out for those. I also feel sorry for Mark Poland and Michael O'Sullivan for asking him to follow Stephen. So next up, we're a little bit behind time, but I did check with Michael before I did so. So next up is Mark Poland and Michael O'Sullivan. Mark, if you know Mark, is the Director of Buildings and Estates in UCC. He's responsible for the overall strategic physical environment of the university. Mark will give you some of the details, but the university has over 155,000 square metres of buildings. There's 120 different individual properties and 130 acres of land. So it's quite a significant and quite a large university. So that's Mark's job is in charge of it. Michael is the architectural draftsman in the Buildings and Estates office. He's been working there since 2004. If anyone's been down to you saw pictures of the library studio and even this space here. Michael is the person who designed this, who drew out this, who decided and suggested what the colours of the carpets were, how the walls should work. I won't say Michael is the one who painted the basement of the Brule dark grey, but so that's what Michael's job is doing. So today, Mark and Michael, for maybe the next 15 minutes, is that okay? Are going to talk about bridging gaps between pedagogy, technology and space. So, Michael.
Yeah, thanks Tom, and thanks Stephen, that was great. Press here. Excellent.
You switch off to your presentation?
Sorry.
So I'll leave it on that view.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the examples from the last couple of years that we've done, and Mark might talk about some of the strategy stuff later on. We won't keep you long, just a couple of minutes to show you what's going on. Full screen. That one. No. How do I go full screen, Tom? I'm not used to it. Sure. Slideshow.
So technology.
Yeah. Okay, so this space, anyway, I don't have a slide on this room, but this room used to be full of nothing. No, it was full of books one stage, and then library contacted Buildings and Estates, and they said we want to make a creative zone. So we this is what the result is: multifunction space, high level desk, low level desk. Thanks. Technology, lighting isn't great in parts, but it's now, I think, one of the most used spaces for events in the library, definitely, and even on campus. So, I'll just flick this way. Okay, so the title for this came yesterday. It had been a collaboration title, and we changed it to Pedagogy, Technology and Space. So I wanted to find out anyway what collaboration was. So I found this, and I thought it kind of made sense to what we do in Buildings and Estates. So it's a cooperative arrangement in which two or more parties, which may or may not have any previous relationships, work jointly. So we work every day with people we've never met before. They tell us, look, we want to change the space, we want to renovate the space, we want to improve how people use the space. And I suppose part of that is we need to know how they teach, and we need to follow on with our knowledge on how to change the space. So I found this as well, knowledge management. So it's no point us making a room or inventing a space if we don't know how it's going to be used. So that's the important part of what we're doing with the teaching and learning group and audiovisual IT services. So quick overview, Creative Zone. I'm going to do a quick slide on Digital Humanities Lab in the Food Science. There's Delight in Innovation Zone in the O'Reilly building. That was College of Business and Law, BIS department. And then there's the School of Bees 4th Year Hub. These were all pre-2016 projects, so I just wanted to give a quick run on those four. The Digital Humanities was designed by there's a team of 4 in our project design team. So there's 2 services coordinators and there's 2 architecture draftspersons. So Paul Williams was involved in this. Multifunction space, collaboration, there's technology, where we have casting from the screen, so you can cast onto your device onto the screen. You can have you can move all the furniture, which is vital. You can have different layouts, and you have different types of computers. There's Apple and there's PC, and it's working really well. You can have different disciplines, different first years, second years, third years working beside each other, and it's a very successful space. And that was Mike Cosgrave and Orla Murphy in Digital Humanities, who we collaborated on that. Another space in the O'Reilly building, and that was Delight. Actually came up with that idea. We helped them on the delivery of the project that was designed just for the use of business students. That's in the basement of the O'Reilly building. There was another one then, which was to try and get all 4th year disciplines in Bs to collaborate together, and that's I was talking to John O'Halloran earlier. He was down there this morning. That's working well. You have marine biology, environmental sciences and animal plant sciences students all collaborating in one space. It was an old lab that wasn't being used, and it just changed around, which is working well. So this is the map from last year. So there's a Health Innovation Hub in the Western Gateway building here on the far west, Digital Humanities, Library in the O'Reilly building, and then that's Cooperage. So it just shows you the spread of these spaces. So then the call out came that John spoke about earlier, and that was exciting because it meant teaching and learning got people to reinvent their spaces, to think about changing the spaces that they were working in. And it was exciting for us because it was like pre-qualification, so once they came to us we were ready to engage straight away, and we knew that it was a runner, so we had met people outside of the 9 that qualified, and there was some really exciting stuff there that hopefully we can deliver in the next few years, but I suppose what this call out managed for us is that the 3 parts of the circle had to work. The buildings and estates, the AV, Wi-Fi, and the teaching part, and we had to try and find that intersection in the middle, which would give the best result really. So we all had our own agendas, but the whole goal is to get that spot in the middle where people can learn, and enjoy their learning and progress and move it on. So there's 7 here. There was 2. There were very minor components. We did audiovisual, did some upgrades, and that was in O'Reilly building, and another one in William Thompson House. So William Thompson House is hopefully being refurbed next year, so we didn't invest too much in that. So there was 3 Boo library projects. There's the library studio, there's the assistive technology quiet room, and the meeting pod upstairs. So as you can see, the library is diversifying into other spaces. It's kindly, you know, providing opportunity for learning, teaching and learning in different ways. So it's been, you know, it's great working with the library and the people working in the library. So I'll just snap through a few of these. That's the one-touch recording that Tom was talking about, so that'll be opening very shortly. We're just almost there, getting it ready. That was great to work with. I mean, it was an old office space, and now it is one-touch recording. That's the green screen at the back, and students and staff will be able to book time on it, and looking forward to seeing what happens in that. Of course, there is a clause in the teaching and learning call-out that you have to come back and evaluate how your space is working. I just spotted that over the last couple of days. So that'll be interesting down the line, you know, see how these things are working. Okay, so that's, you've seen some of these slides from John already. The quiet room for quieter study and comfort, adjustable. There's a couple of those laptop tables that are adjustable, and some are set. So that was a facility with desktops, and we just ripped them out and brought in this just in one section of the room, so just allows for more flexible learning. This will be used for mainly disability support services. Not sure how this is going to be booked. Linda in the assistive technology will have more details on how this space will be used and who will be booking it outside of hours and things like that. But it's really good. You should all have a look at it. It's just above us here. Nice space to work in. School of Education, Stephen O'Brien and Vanessa Rutherford came to us with a proposal to change the ground floor of 3 Fernhurst on Donovan's Road. So I tried to make that picture as bad as I could there on the left. Just turned down the colour and stuff, but it was a wreck. No, we invested as much as we could. We probably will be investing money in this building again, refurbishing. So we were conscious not to put stuff in that would have to be ripped out again in a year or two time. So took out the carpet tile, brought the floor back, and to be honest, the room isn't big enough to take a good shot. This is the same building. It's a small, so I couldn't get any panoramic shots. But again, it's flexible, cafe type. There's a big, massive adjustable screen that you can move around that's fully accessible as well, just behind us. This one isn't finished either. You can see the old seating there, so there's chairs due here. This is out in the dental hospital. The idea here is to have different spaces again. There's multiple screens, so that the photo doesn't do it justice, because there's a lot more to go in there. It's just progress. So the Holla in Dún Vaughan, I couldn't do any photos in that font. Sorry about that there, Kieran. Pressing the button for a long time, it didn't work. So there's another 5 weeks left in that project, so it should be great. Looking forward to that, and looking forward to a weekend down there, hopefully, Kieran. But transforming that space, it was computer lab again, and now it'll be much more flexible technology, hoping to get Wi-Fi down there, proper system, and you know, somewhere inviting and more conducive to active learning, you know. So next one is this one. It was by the Students' Union, their proposal. Hasn't started yet, it's at design stage. Should have a little video here. I have to go to this one. So hopefully this will go ahead. We need to go for a fire cert for this proposal, because it's in an open plan area, but this is just a little sketch we have done up. Now we can't have too much flexible seating here, because you're in an open plan area. You don't want seats to end up in the corridor for fire, so we're hoping for these 2 boot type systems with different layered seating on the outside, so we're hoping that will go ahead maybe in the coming months. So they are the 9 projects, and hopefully I'll be able to get back into this. There we go. Now, Okay. So as you can see, the map has advanced. So all the blue are the deliverables this year. So you can see things have spread out a bit. Doon Keyvon is actually down in Kerry, by the way, Ballyferriter. Dental school is out in CUH. So you can see the, I suppose, teaching areas that are being enhanced and the spread, and hopefully, you know, we can develop on this. And you know, we're not claiming that each of these spaces does the same thing or is completely next generation, but it's a change from just buying 20 seats, laying them out, buying 20 tables and laying them out. It's just, you know, meeting teachers and saying, look, can we do something better here, and something, you know, that will change the way people learn. So next I'll ask Mark up maybe to join the discussion and maybe have an overview on the capital project side, you know.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for taking people through those good examples of things that have been changing. And also, Stephen, his fantastic presentation is kind of no, it's not around. It's fantastic to you know, to get that sense of it, because I think this whole area is evolving, and it's something that I've been involved in the capital development program here for the last longer than I care to remember, 15, 20 years, and things have changed significantly over that period. I remember the first discussion that we had on the Bioscience Institute, where you're looking at bringing together researchers from various areas of the university together, and the big discussion was on how do we get the researchers out of their labs to meet with their colleagues in a cognitive discipline, to see can they collide off each other, can they have space where they can do collaborative research, that they won't be sort of, let's say, pigeonholed in their own area. So that was a kind of a small awakening for me as to, you know how this thing is going to evolve and change over the years, and it has been changing. And I suppose we're kind of delighted to be involved because we need that direction. We need direction of the end users, the teachers, the architectural teams, the likes of Michael, the architects that we commission to design spaces, and it becomes that collaborative effort of everybody to come up with the right range and size, shape, feel of spaces that can contribute to how student learning happens in a most positive way. So the Teaching Learning Spaces group, chaired by John, with Tom and all the colleagues that are here, is really important for us, because we need that direction. It's quite a lonely place when you're you know, trying to get something designed where you don't have that direction, and it's really kind of, so what we did before, let's repeat what we did before. That doesn't work. You have to really kind of be thinking what the current needs are, what the future needs are, and to make sure that we're constantly evolving in terms of the space that we provide. I suppose, you know, in all of those kind of capital projects, you know, these types of spaces are all over the campus, and these are the places I think where a lot of the informal learning is happening, and so they all have a role to play. And I think a lot of the buildings that we developed in the last number of years all have aspects of these types of spaces. I suppose our job now is to make these, as Stephen said, a bit more seductive, maybe, and a bit more you know, tuned in. I'm going to just mention just 2 or 3 projects that are actually under construction or near construction, just as a matter of kind of interest in terms of things that are coming together in the near term. And the 3 projects are very different. The Student Hub is very much about informal learning, student services. So here is just a section through the building, and again it's kind of looking at the kind of space that are going to be in that building, which are going to be providing different sorts of experiences and spaces in which learning will be able to happen. So you can see even the connection to the outside. I mean, that's important that, you know, external spaces are available as well, and maybe could be scheduled, or could be, when you look at, let's say, the likes of the student, the Home Square, for example, we spent days and days and days thinking about how could this space be actually used. And I remember it was open about 3 or 4 weeks, and I walked past it, and what was happening there was nothing like anything that we'd ever thought about could happen. So I think if you kind of offer up spaces and keep them flexible and open, and then people will take those spaces and do what they want with them. I think that's a kind of a sign of a good design, that possibility is there. So the hub will have a number of kind of spaces. I think what's really important is we're looking at, there's an area called the Market Hall, which will be on the ground floor. This will be kind of an open plan collaborative space, again with the possibilities for multifunctional use. But off that, even in the more formal teaching spaces, top left hand corner there, you'll see there's kind of demonstration rooms, so that people who are in that space will actually be able to see what's happening within the classroom. So they can say, well, actually, maybe as a teacher, or a lecture, I've come along, I've seen something happening inside that room done by one of my colleagues. It's something that maybe I can repeat when I go back to my own teaching.
Sorry, Mark. Who comes up with, okay, we want X amount of teaching space in this building? Like, what happens at the planning?
I suppose at the briefing stage, there's a kind of a sense that we wanted this building to have a number of things going on there. We just didn't want it to be a kind of a student services building. We wanted to have a mix of things. So there's 5 different zones in the building, each with a kind of a particular emphasis. One of those is the teaching and learning zone, because we felt that teaching and learning was critical to this building, that students need to be in there, want to be in there, and that they're not just transacting services in there, but they're actually, that their day-to-day academic activity experience is happening within the building. So the building has a number of kind of collision spaces. We've got our room in which we're calling steps, which is kind of a tiered room, which again can be a bit more flexible, a bit more informal. Small little group areas where a group of 2, 3, 4, 5 students can informally just get together, a bit like happens here, and work on their collaborative project. So there's a lot of kind of spaces in the building which will have that fundamental flexibility to be able to respond to needs, but also maybe inspire people in terms of what might happen in their own academic areas. So that building is going to be very exciting, I think, and hopefully in early 2019 we'll be in there using the space for importantly. It's different building. Again, this is kind of a slightly different focus now, because it's really more of an undergraduate teaching postgraduate building where there's more formal studio type work going on in school for School of Architecture, and they're moving from a building, a leased building downtown, into a new building that's currently under construction in South Pres. And I think Sarah's here, but a lot of the colleagues that we've been working with in architecture, again, are bringing to bear a lot of kind of emphasis on this building in terms of flexibility, how crits are done, how students are learning differently to maybe how they would have learned in the past, and we're hoping that the building will be able to respond positively to all their needs. So it's a slightly different kind of an emphasis. And then this is another type of building, which is in Laps Quay, which is for the business school, and it's very much focused on executive education, which again is a different kind of a need. So here you're looking at more kind of banquet style seating, smaller group teaching areas, lots of breakout spaces, the importance of catering to support that, and people learning from each other in kind of exciting spaces. And then you've got a small number of kind of smaller teaching spaces, and then you've got the larger old banking hall, which provides that degree of flexibility to be able to go and do things informally as you wish as part of that teaching experience. So again, we're kind of excited that that's going to offer us something that maybe we don't currently experience on campus. Just a couple of other small points. We have a master plan. The university has its academic strategic plan, and we have a physical development strategy which kind of backs that up. And we're going to commission Tim Cronin's office here with us. Tim is a colleague of mine in the Capital Projects office, and we'll be commissioning consultants to come in and update our master plan. And if you look at our old master plan, which is only kind of 2004 I think it is, but there's no section particularly on teaching spaces. Whereas I think next time around there's going to have to be a major emphasis on teaching spaces, how they're evolving, how we're using our space, and I think that's something that we'll be looking for the input from the Teaching and Learning Committee. I just put this up at the end just to kind of, I suppose, just to kind of maybe throw a bit of a challenge, because if you look...
Where's my presentation, by Tom? Do you know?
Did you want a presentation?
I did. Thank you. I'm talking about my most favourite thing, or nearly my most favourite thing in the whole world, which is libraries. And you may have seen outside we actually are running a campaign with the hashtag Love Your Library, which is all to do with green and sustainability. And we have great partners here in UCC, and it's the importance earlier, I think, of what Stephen showed in one of his very impressive slides very near the end about collaboration. Everything is about collaboration. We work with the instructional designers, we're working with Mark and his team in buildings and estates, we work with teaching and learning, we work with researchers. We work with everyone to try and make this library, both physically and virtually, the best that it can be. And we still have a long way to go. So, I thought I could have shown you a whole lot of lovely pictures of libraries, and I don't think that necessarily really does it. You need to know why I'm doing it in the first place. And I thought it would be more valuable to start this presentation off for a few minutes and look at the big picture. What is the big picture that is actually driving libraries and the thinking behind libraries and library directors like myself worldwide? And this is worldwide. There's little difference here in any of the libraries that I'm talking about in the principles that we're going from. So these are the big themes, and I've got about 3 slides of these. First of all, we are the gatekeepers to information and knowledge. So a lot of our libraries is about content, and our content is physical and it's digital. So we have to keep that in mind when we think of what do you expect from a library. There's going to be content, whether it be books, whether it be our special collections, whether it's digital. Because it's digital, we now have to think of the new media and technology. All of this here. Whoops, I keep doing that every time. We have to think of new media and technology. So we're not talking about only books as such. We are talking now about the library studio downstairs. Our students are going to be using that as our academics. There's going to be output coming from that. That is research output, as well as other types of output. How do you actually store that? How do you manage it as a library? How do you find that output in a catalogue? So that's, again, very much traditional library, but bringing it, evolving it with technology. We're always under financial constraint, and you will be aware, I'm quite sure, about the whole open access movement, and of course libraries want open access for everyone. We're under serious constraint there with our publishers. And we in particular must balance our role as a place for independent study and collaboration. We have to give the opportunity to our users to have the choice of the environment they want to work in, whether it's individual study, nice quiet place, group study rooms, or a room like this here. And there's many actual different environments in every corner of this room. It can be configured in many different ways, or it can be the whole one room. And this is really small scale compared to what other libraries are doing, but it's a really good start for us. So these are our themes. Next ones. We have to cater to all of our patrons, our users, by making sure that they are the centre of everything. So the focus of everything that we do is our user. So we have to look at user-centric design. And as you heard earlier, we have to know how people use things, how they want to use them, how our children want to use them, how our students want to use things, and take that data and go with that. To use all the information that we have in the formats that is coming, digital literacy is absolutely crucial. So you can't see it today, but if I could come in here at any one time, and we've got high desks, there's about 5 of them, opposite every screen here, and all of our students are sitting, working on their laptops and directing up to the screen. But how do our students know how to use this stuff? Are they using it in the best way? Are you all using it in the best way? So that's where the whole digital and media literacy comes into, and that's where libraries are absolutely crucial as well. We already do that as part of our roles with information literacy, and our librarians teach on that. We have to defend our fundamental values, and I know we didn't talk about it, it was mentioned, fake news earlier. It's absolutely crucial that libraries and librarians in their profession are actually showing how you spot fake news. How do you do it? So there's a whole lot of critical thinking and all that stuff going on there. Okay, so this is one of our big themes. And the other thing is we have to look at how we reorganise ourselves. And you all know that yourselves in your own organisational structures, my organisational structures. How am I going to change those to actually adapt so that we can evolve to meet what we really have to? And you might be interested to know a new role that I have just advertised recently is a head of academic technology and communication. And you'll see how that fits in a minute. We don't get very many roles like that in libraries at the moment, but that has really taken what we're doing here in learning spaces forward. So the whole thing about digital scholarship and technologies, especially in the research landscape, is evolving. People are producing research in a very different way. It's all under discussion at the minute. And the other thing that's way down the line for us is the whole thing about artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. So, don't want to be too long on this because I'm under time. These are trends that are accelerating technology adoption. And you can see here at the minute, I'll go down to the bottom, short term, research data management and the user experience. So every library that you're talking to, that's what we're currently working on at the minute. I'll show you why that's important for learning spaces and technology. 2 minutes time. Patrons as creators, there's your maker spaces. We expect our students to have the opportunity to come into areas like this, or maker spaces, or spaces that have stuff you can play with. And I literally do like the word play. I use it myself a lot because I think a lot of learning happens through play and making stuff. And we need to have that. We don't have it yet here, but we do need to have maker spaces. Nearly every library has them. And we need to rethink our library space to allow all of this other stuff to happen. So I can just tell you very briefly, we've got about 4 more floors in this library. We've got 3 floors of books. I intend shortly to have, some stage, 2 floors of books and 1 other floor for other stuff, if you want to put it that way. We'll make sure that the access to books will be there as you need it and fast, but we are going to give technology-rich space when I get the money from somebody, and actually plan that floor in such a way that users can come in and use the library. In particular, our academics who can actually work from their offices much more don't use the library. I have seen places, for example, in the Hunt Library in North Carolina State University, who have a lovely lounge for academics where they can sit and collaborate. I'm not talking about our staff room, but it is a lovely space within the library along with other technology-rich spaces. It's for your academics. You can have a similar space for your researchers. So you can have lots of really nice space like that. The other thing is the whole thing about cross-institution collaboration. I'll give you an example of that. I was in North Carolina State University, very impressed with one of the rooms, I'll show you later. Lots of digital projectors, no windows, had all these digitized images up on the 4 walls. It happened to be the manuscript, Voynich manuscript, which has a connection with UCC through Bull. And here am I sitting in North Carolina, and it turned out that that manuscript is in Yale, it's owned by Yale, but the students and the academics were collaborating in North Carolina and in Yale, working on the same manuscript in the same room because it was digitized. That is cross-institution collaboration. And I thought that was a lovely, neat little example of how we could be doing this. Those are the kind of years, as I mentioned, so there's quite a... And you know what? It'll happen even faster than this, I'm quite sure. Every time they put a kind of year limit on it, take another year off it. It's going to happen faster than that. So, rethinking library spaces. And I'm going to use the example of the Hunt Library, which I did visit. You should have a look at it. It's very, now you've got these websites anyway, it's very clearly on the web. I'm not going to go into this here, the Library of the Future, because it's now 8 minutes long. It was 3 minutes, they extended it to 8, but it's a lovely description of what you can do in their library and the ethos behind it. And I can guarantee nearly every university librarian in the land, in Ireland, in the UK and elsewhere, Europe, have all visited this library one way or the other because it's won masses of awards, because it can show you what technology can do. Michael's been from Buildings and Estates, which is great that he did do that. Now, the Hunt Library, a serious amount of money went into it, but there's another library on campus called the Hill Library, and it's an older library. It's like this, but it just shows you what you can do in an older library that you refurbish. Low-hanging fruit, little money, you can actually, with a bit of thought, get exactly the same results as a very serious, high-tech library with lots of money put into it. It just depends on a little bit of creative thinking and the will to do it, in my opinion. So, going down from that, if I can, can't remember where I had it. Oh yeah, the rooms. If you look, they will give you a description of all of the rooms. How do I get back to this? Anyway, go in and have a look at the description of all of the rooms in the Hunt Library. It will show you the digitalisation studios, it will show you visualisation studios and creative studios. And when I mentioned earlier before about research, you may wonder, why am I talking about research? I'm talking about the output of research and big data, and how, if you have the appropriate studios like the visualisation studio, that your students and the researchers can be working together interactively in those kind of rooms to actually display the data that they're getting from projects. So that's the value of that kind of technology in a room. And again, if you look at this other library, I think, which is in Australia, again, they have a learning lounge. Bring your own device, no technology, because students are bringing their own devices. They have what's called a survival station. I wondered what that was. It basically was water and actually just a microwave, so students could use it if they wanted it. But most importantly, swipe access 24/7. There you are, you've got a facility sitting in the middle of the library for your learning lounge. Come in and use it anytime and use your swipe card. A lot of places are doing. And if anybody looks at RCSI at the moment, which is just opened in Dublin at a cost of 80 million, that is a really top of the, what would you call it, of the list of very good places to go from a library point of view, but also from a teaching point of view. A fabulous resource actually, and it's definitely worth a visit, which I think will happen in the near future. The Knowledge Lab, again, and talking about makerspaces and visualisation contests. If you link into any of these here, you will see what the students are actually doing, the way they're running all their contests on visualisation. They've done it for the last 3 years in the Hunt Library, and they're given prizes for that. But the whole thing about it is, it's the creativity and the innovation that's coming out of the opportunity of allowing that to happen in space. And I have to say, we have our Blackstone partners here, and ourselves here in the library, and I see some of the things that happen in this room, and it's just absolutely wonderful. Even yesterday, the buzz that was here for a whole day with the students in what was happening. I can't put the names on the door outside what it was, but Peter and ourselves, we have made this provision. We're working with different banks, we're working with different groups. The students are coming in, students that have never met each other before, they're cross-discipline, and they're all working together in something. And the best thing about it is, when they leave the room, they actually want to meet up again with the group that they're in to bring this forward. So that's the thing about libraries, is actually giving that opportunity for space and bringing it forward. So in an evolving landscape, I would just say, the library continues and will continue to serve as the metaphorical and physical hub of the campus. Particularly here in UCC, you couldn't get a better location. It's absolutely fabulous. One side of the quadrangle. And not forgetting, we do have 3 other libraries, so I have to be mindful of my colleagues who think I only talk about Bull Library. I don't. But we're also a cultural and social centre. And the plan that I have at the moment, I'm looking at, Mark mentioned about a master plan for space for UCC generally. I have a master plan in the making for UCC Library, and it'll be very much taking in these kind of functional areas to provide this kind of resource, this kind of service, this kind of opportunity for all users that want to come into the library. Something I heard recently which I found really quite touching, feedback from something I had heard from a pilot that had happened recently with our students, Student Central. We had it for 3 weeks. Student Central is to do with the student hub here on campus, and they were out at our desk looking to see the services that are going to sit in the student hub. How could we actually start it now and translate that and bring it forward? One of the things that's come across very strongly from students, especially in their first year, when they're coming across in campus, they may know absolutely no one. We've got lots of lovely spaces around this campus for people to sit down and have a coffee and all of that, but they said the library was the only place that you could actually come in and be comfortable sitting on your own, because there's such pressure socially to be sitting with somebody or being in company and having that. And I thought, well, that was very poignant actually. You know, we're supporting students in that we can actually offer them that kind of safe place, that sanctuary, and libraries would be considered a sanctuary in that. So as well as giving them a multitude of different environments, we have to make sure that they also feel that this place is theirs, that they can come to it. So I would be looking much more in the master plan for a cultural and social centre here. And I know in this room, I know in a few weeks' time we will have Red FM coming in, it's a music station locally, who will be doing things here. We've got plenty of the student societies who come in and do things, and we've plenty of our companies from outside and our entrepreneurs who do as well. And I see Porrick sitting down there, and I've just wakened them up. I'm only playing with you, Porrick. And he did a great conference, a 2-day conference here early in the summer on Irish manuscripts. And in this room here, and using the content that we had downstairs from special collections as well as other things that came in. And I thought, well, that's just exactly the way a library should be. We should be able to offer that kind of space for that kind of work. So I'm not even going to go over that again, but I'm going to talk about technology-rich space. And I do like this, so I'm putting it up everywhere. Can I just say now, 2 minutes, because I think it is important. We're doing lots of great things in the library. I'm very happy with the way things have changed over the last year or so. But I did have to host a group of visiting Australian librarians recently, and I took them around the library because this is a wonderful building, thanks to Mark, in the building of the building and the awards it has won. They went round and they looked at our spaces in our library studio, which will be open in other places. They didn't even notice it. This is nothing to them, because they've got so much better for so long and because they're so well resourced. And I thought that was interesting. What really intrigued them, and again, this is the future of libraries, what really intrigued them was our special collections librarian and our archivist took them downstairs, where we had a whole lot of archives and papers sitting out on the tables. When we started to talk as how we as librarians work with our academics to use the content that's in our special collections, whether it's on paper or digitised, and how that was being used with them for research or with teaching and learning, that really resonated with our colleagues. To the extent they actually took the pages that we were using to take it back to Australia and say, this is what we're going to look at. And I thought, that's fabulous. We may not be getting the technology yet because we haven't had the money for the few years. We've got even better. And the second thing, and you'll be interested to know, that was the student hub. They have very few student hubs as yet in Australia, in the areas that they were in. And the exhibition that we had outside for the student hub, they were just clicking away on their cameras to take that back to try and inform the people that they were working with in the student hubs. That's the only thing I have to say, apart from at 5 o'clock we have an opening of an exhibition outside, and you're all very welcome to come to that exhibition. The President will be there, Professor Joe Lee will be there as well. It's a really important exhibition showing what we have in our archives, which is unique and which will be there for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and apologies again for pushing you on. I suppose it's no coincidence that we're actually having this event here today in the library. So in the creative zone in particular, if you look at some of the furniture around there, I just want to draw people's attention to the hut at the back of the room. So this three-sided structure at the back of the room is an easy to assemble space that can be used. It's used often in corporate spaces. We asked the people who resell that in Ireland to come in today and just put one up. So if you're around later on, just want to have a chat and have a look at that, I think it's well worth a look. Our next speaker today is Mike Cosgrave, Dr. Mike Cosgrave, and Mike, I was quite intrigued looking at your bio when it said that your Masters is in Beamish and Crawford and your PhD is in the participation of the Irish in the UN missions in the Congo. That's quite diverse. Mike is the proud occupier and user of the Digital Arts Humanities Room, which you would have seen earlier on. So Mike to talk about locating learning in physical, virtual and metaphorical spaces. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. Having used that wonderful space for a year or two, and it certainly takes time to get used to it, it seems to me that there's a few points I wanted to make today that are quite brief. But I wanted to start off with this. My Bricks and Models title plays on bricks and mortar. And amongst pipe smokers, a B&M, a bricks and mortar, is your local friendly tobacconist. So that's where the B&M phrase comes into my life. And the thing about it is that it is a place of expertise. It is a place of craftsmanship. When you go into your local bricks and mortar tobacco shop, it is not just some place where you buy your packet of, or your tin of Aaron Moore. What makes it unique is that the person who runs a good tobacconists knows their tobaccos and knows their blends. So you don't just have the tins, you also have the open blends and the mason jars. And if you have a problem, like the fact that Dunhill are going to stop making early morning pipe, what am I going to do to replace my favourite blend? They can help you craft a solution to that problem. And part of crafting that solution, and I think this is important, is that they have the skill to identify and recognize and work out how much do you know when you walk in the door. What is the level of knowledge that you're bringing with you? And they make you feel comfortable because, of course, and this goes to Steve's comments about membership models in education, they want you to keep coming back. So they want to find the thing that fits you and that your wife won't complain about too much stinking up the house. So there is a craftsmanship there, but there's also a knowledge operation happening there in an artisan way. I wanted to put in the statutory picture of the University of Bologna lecture from the Middle Ages, and of course make the obvious comment about learning spaces that they haven't changed at all in 800-900 years, but actually they are. The large lecture learning space is changing a lot, and some of those are pedagogically informed. The scale-up teaching labs and the technology-enhanced active learning labs in MIT go back quite some time. And they are very much focused on problem-orientated learning, mostly in the sciences, on getting people to use their classroom time to solve problems and do actual work rather than simply absorbing content. And the dates there are informative. Scale-up as a pedagogy certainly goes back to the early 2000s. The Teal lab in MIT goes back to 2005. So these things are not new. And in, for example, Minnesota, as one example, they have a building with 10 of these labs, with capacities from 75 to 126, which means that every year, for the past 7 years, over 10,000 students have taken courses in a flipped classroom lab that was designed expressly for flipped classroom pedagogy. So while we don't have that many, and we're just starting that road here in UCC, it is a road that a lot of other people have travelled, and they have a lot of practical experience. It's also something where in foraging around and looking at learning spaces, I was surprised to discover that people are doing interesting things in the traditional large lecture theatre room. So Leeds, for example, have put in these wonderful bench-shaped collaboration spaces, as have in blue at the top the City University in London, and apparently Queen's plan an enormously wonderful collaborative learning space in a large lecture room with seating arrangements, nests that are expressly designed for collaboration. I'm kind of a little worried that perhaps this is becoming a trend. They've got them, we should have them. I'm also a little bit concerned because I'm very much afraid that in an awful lot of cases, I mean, what's the point in refitting a lecture theatre into this shape unless the people who use the lecture theatre are actually prepared or have some concept of pedagogy where they will use collaborative group learning in their lectures. So I'm concerned about a disjoint there between what we can do with the buildings and what we do with the pedagogy. And that's a theme I want to return to. We're building the hub, and the hub is going to be magic. The hub is going to transform student learning. The hub is going to be like the holodeck. It's going to be like stellar cartography in Star Trek. And the thing about it is that, I mean, one of the things we said was that it will be technology rich, but we must be able to refit it for new technology as it comes along. And we're now seeing a situation where augmented reality and virtual reality is becoming so commonplace that what we originally thought would go in the hub might not be what goes in the hub. New things will have to go in there. But the interesting thing about it is that we have a great many models of the relationship between technology and pedagogy. And many of them are circular. There's like a hub in the middle and they go around as a circle. So there's the community of inquiry model, which actually goes back to an academic paper as long ago as 1992, which is in the last century in many respects, about how online discussions work. And there's the TPAC framework, which many of us will have come across, which links technology and pedagogy into a teaching framework, but is entirely space agnostic. Like the community of inquiry, it makes no reference to the physical space in which some or all of this learning happens. Gilly Salmon's 5-stage model of socialization through to knowledge creation, again, looks like a set of steps, but it again is purely designed for online learning, where we have done an enormous amount of thinking. Diane Lorillard's model, which many of us will have come across in the CERT and the diploma and the Masters in Teaching and Learning, is a very detailed breakdown of how knowledge flows in online learning. And the one thing that struck me when I dug the diagram out again was, of course, all the flows are the same. They're the same volume, they're the same pace. There's nothing in that lovely, neat diagram which suggests there's any difference between the volume of information or the rate at which it moves around the different parts of the cycle. And this is something which is not necessarily the case, because learning does not always move at paces that are even around the whole cycle. And of course, the other thing about all of these is they're all about technology, but they're all about digital technology. And this may be very strange because I'm a digital humanist, and I have said that my iPad is my spirit guide, and I've said it with a straight face. So it may seem very strange to me to say that there's a problem with all these technology learning pedagogy frameworks, which is that they do not actually talk about bricks. There is a gap there. It was very clearly brought home to me a number of years ago in the Masters in Digital Arts and Humanities, when one of our students pointed out that a Greek amphitheatre is a technology. It is a very advanced technological design for its age, designed to optimize the experience of attending Greek drama. And in fact, all the different bits that go with it, the masks that the actors, that the cast wore, were also designed to amplify the performance and to make it work. So the whole thing was an integrated technology solution. But because you didn't have to pay the Apple tax to use it, we don't think of it as technology. There's this gap here that we need to bridge between the technology and the concrete, between the digital and the concrete, and we need models that will allow us to do that. And there are also models of teaching and learning which also revolve around a hub, which think of teaching and learning in terms of a cycle. So some, Kolb, Donald Schoen, we will all be familiar with this cycle of acting, reflecting on learning, conceptualizing, applying it, which comes up in so many cases and in so many times, and it also is a circle that revolves around a hub. As is the other cycle, which comes from business knowledge management, which is this idea that people know stuff. One of the secrets of business knowledge management, the first stage, is recognizing what is the buried institutional knowledge that people have, or in the case of students, what are the assumptions that they bring in? What do they know about learning? Because before you can build new knowledge in the paradigms of business knowledge management, you have to work out what you know, make it explicit, and then build on it. And this goes back to the tobacconist dealing with the naive user walking in the door wanting to improve their experience. You have to find out what the people coming in the door need. And when you've made that explicit, then you can build your other cycles upon it. And it's like the trainer in your gym. The first thing you do when you take out a membership to your gym is you do an assessment. And then you pay your sub for life, because every now and again your trainer reminds you what you're supposed to be doing. So there is this cyclical model. And eventually, what I feel we don't have and what we need is at least a tricycle, if not more. In that there are things we understand about physical space, like light levels and sound and things like that. There's the wheel of things we understand about pedagogy. We understand about teaching and learning, but it's not always related to the physical space or to the technology. And there's the wheel of models that we have about technology and how technology-enhanced learning works. And we really need to put those three together. In sort of randomly collecting literature about next generation learning spaces, one of the things that struck me is that these three things do not always well come together. So it seems to me that there are three areas where various different people in UCC have extensive knowledge, and what we need to do in the next generation of scholarship about this is bring those disparate things about bricks, about the digital, and about students, put them together in something that works together and pedals off nicely in the same direction. So I think that's probably one of the interesting challenges that we can explore in an interdisciplinary way over the coming years.
Well done, Mike. Fantastic. Brought us back on schedule. Our last speaker then today is Dr. Daniel Blackshields. So Daniel teaches on various programs that are run by the Centre for the Integration of Research into Teaching and Learning. So the CERT, the postgraduate CERT, the diploma, and the Masters in Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. Daniel's topic today is, well, actually, I'll let Daniel explain what the topic is. I'll just get your presentation up.
Figure out what the topic is.
Okay, so Daniel Blackshields, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Watch me ruin Mike's ability to get us on time. Thanks very much. I was thinking, well, it was always terrible being the graveyard speaker for number one. It's nearly 5 o'clock. Number two, all the interesting things have already been said already. But it got worse today when Stephen was talking, and that actually most of us are brain dead at this stage anyway. And even worse than that, while he was talking, and he was talking about the examination hall and the issues in the examination hall and performance being affected, some may know that my other role is in the appeals officer for UCC, and Mike is in the exams committee, and we took a wry smile at one another and watched our workload exponentially grow. So I was thinking about this. I won't stick to time, so Catherine down there is going to tell me shut up. So normally I'm just going to stop, basically, when time is time. I was thinking about what I might be able to contribute to a forum like this. And as usual, I normally kind of go back to one of my great teachers, and it would seem that Stephen shares a similar philosophy, and that's my daughter in May, who's 7. And she normally teaches me much that is of importance, because she stops me in my tracks. She stops me from my way of thinking. How is she looking at this, or what's this about? And I was thinking about something that occurred during the summer. And during the summer, I was teaching on a CERTL program, a summer school for lecturers from China, and there was a couple of people from Peru as well. And that's normally the way. I normally phone home afterwards just to see how things are, and her mum and herself tearing each other's hair out or whatever. And normally Elise answers the phone and says, "Oh, Dad, what were you doing?" "Well, I was teaching people from China and Peru today." To which she said, "Peru?" I said, "Yes, Peru. Were they," wait for it, "human beings?" And I momentarily stopped, of course. What a strange question. And then paused myself and said, "Well, hang on a second. Why is a 7-year-old asking this? Why is this become, give it reason. Give it, say that, no, this is a sensible question." And of course, she's 7. She loves to read. That's her experience. So when she hears Peru, this is what she sees. Why wouldn't she? Paddington Bear. Because guess where Paddington Bear is from? And all Ellie Mae, as a 7-year-old, knows is that bears who talk and eat marmalade live in Peru, and they have a home for retired bears in Lima. And that's as much as her knowledge brings us. Now the interesting thing, of course, when you look at that is, we can't just catapult our knowledge and our experience to her. We have to start from where she's at and bring and complicate her way of thinking that yes, there are talking bears in Peru, but that's in fiction, love, and there's another place called Peru as well. And when I was thinking about this in the context of pedagogy, terrible word, teaching and learning, whatever, strategies, and spaces or learning spaces, I was thinking in terms of, well, what do we attend to? What's the source of our intentions and attentions as teachers, as administrators, as designers, as students? I was thinking about if we really want to see where all of these new possibilities and new ways of thinking, both in terms of teaching and learning strategies and in terms of space, may bring us, we have to actually firstly discover, how do we attend to this social field called teaching and learning? How do we look at this world as a teacher, as a designer, as an administrator, as a student? And to ask ourselves and to realize that what we know of oneself, right? We only know oneself to the extent that we know the world, and one becomes aware of oneself only within the world. And crucially, every object, well contemplated, potentially opens up a new organ of perception within us. Now, why I was thinking about this was, and Mike had touched on it earlier on, is when we start thinking about teaching and learning strategies, and we start thinking about the idea of learning spaces, when you look at all the research that's going on with all this, in many ways, yes, they're like lovers, and they're lovers involved in a dance. If we look at pedagogy, many of the more constructivist pedagogies that are out there now, the more popular ones, whether it be integrative learning or transformational learning or teaching for understanding or problem-based learning or assessment as learning, seem to have three principles, three through lines. One, the idea is learning is becoming personalized. We're moving away from the kind of mass consumer type education where everybody learned the same stuff and the stuff was downloaded to them. And it's becoming more personalized. It's about developing the students, not only their competencies, their knowledge and skills, but their capacities and crucially then their capabilities, who they are becoming. It's about participation, individual and crucially, as we've heard again in many, many occasions, collaboratively. That the student is engaged themselves, with their peers, with their teachers. And that, of course, leads to performance, most potentially, of course, authentic performance, authentic assessment, authentic stuff, not just activities, that is going to bring them to some place where they develop the self, who they are and who they are becoming. So a lot of learning, or a lot of the literature on learning and teaching of learning seems to be about movement, and seems to be about getting people beyond the idea of getting it to the realization that how to learn, and as other people have said today, love it, be embraced by it, be seduced by learning. Seduced by learning for what purpose? Not some sort of an epistemological purpose, i.e. the theories of knowledge and developing that, but rather ontological, the idea of theory of the self, being, who you are becoming. Now in a sense, if that's the case, learning is starting to be at least written about, or at least in terms of what we call in business, obviously Mike again, reference Chris Agris and Donald Sean speak of the idea of espoused theory, what we talk about. And that is of course the theory in use, what our practice actually tells us about what we value. But we seem to be saying that learning is a personal creative act for the student as learner. But of course, if we're not to leave it to chance, then the teacher has a key role in how they design, how they reflect, how they reframe and redesign that learning environment so that the student can engage in a personal creative act. And if we start thinking about our other part of our lover, learning space, tends to, at least in the literature that I've read, and I'm no expert in the area, tends to kind of break down to two, something called physical space. Again, as Mike said, a lot of the literature is on about the online, but the physical space and the artifacts within it. And of course, technology. And again, what was said about technology, the idea that we often sort of narrow our idea or a mental model of technology to being this, when of course a pencil is technology and how we use it. When we start thinking about learning space, it was interesting. I was listening to Michael and Mark in particular, as people who were designers coming into some buildings and estates, and was listening to the language they were using. It often seems to be, think of the spaces in terms of the behaviour you want, and then change the space. And there seems to be a kind of a linear process, into schematics and all that. What are the competencies we want? What is the pedagogy that lead to those competencies? What is the assessment? that will be able to show us whether that pedagogy is being achieved. And then, what's the physical and technological environments? Or, as often is the case, technology and then the physical environment. So it often seems to be that the space is seen as a supportive role, not necessarily an equal partner in this sense, but is supporting pedagogy. And as other people have said, sometimes then the discussions in teaching and learning, something that I've researched now for over 10 years, is devoid of any conversation of the spaces that may impact on the ability to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about Gregory Bateson. He's a philosopher. He speaks about, do we ever think about our hands? Often when we think about our hands, we think about the digits, our fingers. You can see them. But as he's argued, in many ways, it's the spaces between the digits, the relationship between the digits, the relationship between the fingers, the opposable thumb, there, which is most important. Because if our hand was designed like this, how different our world would be. So I was thinking about this in the context of pedagogy or teaching and learning strategy and the idea of space. I'm always wondering, do the teaching and learning people look at their digits? Do the space people look at their digits? And do we only oftentimes, in an espoused way as opposed to a theory in use, and we are a living example of it today, talk about the relationships between the two? And that, is it that, in that relationship, the space is a supporting partner? Or are they real lovers? We're in the creative zone. I teach creativity. The last thing you should have for creativity is lines of chairs like this. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about our relationship, the teaching and learning strategies, the teaching space. I wonder, are we more like this? Are we lovers that have covers over us? Do we have blind spots? And that blind spot is, what are our intentions and what are our intentions? Not what we say in strategy documents. Not what we say in our schematics, but what we do and how we do it. And more particularly, where we're coming from when we are doing it. One of my favorite short films, which I use an awful lot when I'm exploring, I do scenario analysis with my master's students. John has come in many times, and Catherine indeed, to work with me on them. And I also do my problem solving classes in economics, and I use the music box by Lauren Hardy. And in the music box in Lauren Hardy are charged with bringing a music box to a particular destination. And they meet a postman. He says, oh yeah, it's up there. This stoop, by the way, if you go to LA, is still a landmark. So the music box won an Oscar in 1932. Do they show some knowledge and skill in trying to get the music box up the steps? Absolutely. Do they show capacity? Absolutely. Resilience, their personality in terms of their resilience, their motivation to get there is phenomenal. But they get to the top eventually after going down 3 or 4 times. And they get to the top and they meet the postman again. And the postman says to them, did you just bring that all the way up there? Yes. You didn't have to do that. You see that road down there? You just could have followed that road up there and you could have gotten here. To which Hardy responds, oh, why didn't we think of that? Now, what was interesting was more profound there again. It wasn't necessarily a knowledge problem. They could have found the knowledge out. They got a way of thinking that the environment was only one way. This is the environment. So we've got to embed in this environment. We have to move through this environment. And they got stuck in a mental model, a mindset. And crucial, what happened with that, of course, is when they came to the bottom of the stairs first, they came in a horse and cart. But because all they saw were the steps, the horse and cart were not seen as resources. It was a blind spot for them. Because the environment was seen in a particular way. If we want to reveal the masks as teachers, administrators, students, designers, and all other stakeholders that are engaged in learning, if we're taking learning out of the idea of the classroom, we firstly have to start not with our rhetoric, though that's important, but seeing how we see. Not again in what we're saying, but in what we see. Why was this room designed the way it was? Why were the chairs put that way? It's so easy to slip back into our old routines because they're embedded in us. They're mental models. We very rarely investigate our mental models. And to see, our seeing is, we have to have an open mind. What assumptions are we making? What assumptions do we make about students? What assumptions do we make about designers or teachers? Come at it with an open heart. Be willing to get over our immunities to change, whatever they may be, and then have an open will to drive on. Always remember, big fan of David Bohm, the quantum physicist. The observer is not separated from the object observed. Our spaces, our teaching and learning activities, our teaching and learning strategies are social constructions. And oftentimes they're social constructions that we are thrown into. Here's the curriculum, go teach it. Here's the space, go use it. It's there, we're thrown into it. And oftentimes, what's the easiest thing to do, as happened today? We slip into our routine. So what have you become today? Passive consumers. In a conference that is about getting out of being passive. And what's happening? The space is forcing you to be that passive consumer. When I start thinking about how we might reveal those masks and so the lovers become equal partners, I think what you think about when we're thinking about being as teachers or being as students or being as designers, that we don't exist alongside one another. We don't exist alongside objects and we don't exist alongside others. We are in significant relationships with one another. And those significant relationships with one another are caused by our interactions with one another. We are not teachers without students. We are not teachers without teaching tools. We are not teachers without institutions. We are a system. If we forget that we are a system, if we abstract away from that and say we're only going to look at teaching and learning and we're only going to look at space, it's always a blind spot. We are being in the world. The problem with being in the world, of course, is when you inhabit a world, it's very hard to see how you are seeing that world. You're just acting. And you can slip into what Heidegger calls an inauthentic way of being. And he doesn't mean that in a pejorative way. We all have to follow customs and rules and so forth. But an inauthentic way is to inhabit the world in a customary way. It is what it is. And we'll just move on. An authentic way is to open up the possibilities through our involvement in the world. To be aware, to be willing to experiment, to appreciate that we don't necessarily have all the answers, or we don't necessarily always have to follow the rules. There might be ways and reasons to bend them. There's an issue with that. It'll depend on our values, our expectations, our previous experiences. Every one of our actions that we engage in is embedded in a mental model. A mental model about who we are as VP for Teaching and Learning, who we are as a lecturer, who we are as an administrator. Even those terms, which we are trying to shake out of them, of course. We don't not call administrators, administrators call them professional. But now we have the other things. Does that mean we're amateurs? So we don't call them students anymore, call them learners. Don't call us lecturers anymore, call us teachers, call us facilitators. Yeah, there's language and that's really important. But does it go any deeper? Because embedded in all of our mental models are embedded in containers, and those containers are our deepest held values and beliefs. And again, as I say, even the way that this room is configured today tells us what our deepest values and beliefs are. So what I'm suggesting is linearity, and certainly this idea that in some shape or form space is subservient or supportive only of pedagogy, rather than in a dance, where at any one time either partner may take the lead key role, is key to change that metaphor. And my idea is, like again David Bohm, that when we are working as teaching and learning experts or as designers or students, that we're coming at it through the idea of folding, enfolding, unfolding. The idea of a continuous learning loop of theory, perception, action, and not getting stuck. For that to happen, I think we've got to take deep dive learning journeys together. And what I mean by a deep dive learning journey is not to stand up here and say, if I was a student, this is what I think. If I was a designer, this is what I think, and if I was a teacher, this is what I would think. But rather, and not ask them, not observe them, be them. The best way for anybody who's done the teaching and learning cert, what is the one thing that as often comes out of that? It was amazing to see things through the eyes of a student again. Because you're living as a student. You're experiencing things as a student. Just as simple as deadlines. Jesus, will I get an extension? The things that irritate us as lecturers, we just get it done. Total immersion. Because in total immersion, what you do is you start to see what is your familiar world in unfamiliar ways. And in seeing it in unfamiliar ways, you get to see what it is to see the world through those eyes. And that has an impact on what we design and why we design it. It will give us humility, it will give us modesty in our claims, it will give us accountability, and crucially it will take us out of our experience, but expands the possibility of our imagination. We're in Cork. A couple of weeks' time is the Jazz Festival. For me, the idea of there being a leader orchestrating all the little bits and pieces is not going to release our blind spots or provide us with the opportunity to see potentiality. And what I mean by that is, again, I think Mark or Michael has said it, we didn't even think about what they were going to use that space for. That for me is jazz. Improvisation, improvus, not seen ahead of time. Jazz improvisators are performing and experimenting at the same time. They're discovering the rationale of what they're doing as they are working. They don't know where their queries are going to lie and how the action will unfold. They're experimenting constantly. And there are a number of organizational characteristics to jazz improvisation. 1, minimal structures to engender maximum flexibility. Now, I don't mean by structure just necessarily, obviously, the artifacts in the physical place, the rules, the regulations, the way we think. Provocative competence. A jazz musician will always just play the notes slightly different than they did before, just to see what would happen. My favourite example of that is sometimes I put my lecture slides on continuous loop, and I sit down amongst the students, and they're chatting away, and about 3 minutes in, somebody might go, has the lecture started? I said, I don't know. What's a lecture? Just provoke them. Embrace errors as source of learning. I heard about it, don't have a perfect space. Don't have a perfect pedagogy. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as we know what all the competencies are going to be. Everything that's telling us in the world of business that a lot of our kids will be working in businesses in 5 and 10 years' time that haven't even been created yet. What are we doing creating perfection now? It'll be imperfect by next year. Embrace errors, in inverted commas, as a source of learning. Where will this bring us? Alternate between soloing and supporting. The best jazz group, main guy doesn't take over all the time. He comps. Sometimes the designers need to take the lead. Sometimes the students need to take the lead. Sometimes the lecturers need to take the lead. And sometimes they need to follow and know what it is to follow. And hang out. Hang out. We spoke today about the idea of being a community as a practice. Hang out as a community of learners from all our different perspectives and take that deep dive learning journey together. Otherwise, we may get stuck in our mental models. And always remember this. No matter how much knowledge and skill we are introduced to, like my daughter here next to Boo. If Crewe is a place where only talking bears with marmalade come from, well, that's how we'll still see the word. For me, take what Miles Davis says. Don't play what's there. Play what's not there. Thank you.
That's the last time I'm going to organise something in here and arrange the chairs and rows. I've been told. Okay, so thank you very much, Daniel, for that. We're just going to wrap up, really. So for one final time, I'm just going to ask Professor John O'Halloran back onto the stage just to wrap up and talk about next steps. So we have just something small, I suppose, that we want to announce at the end of this. John, if
I can stay here after that, actually, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I apologise for nipping it out, but obviously other duties call on me during these things. So I unfortunately missed some of them. I'm enjoying the fact that they're all recorded, so
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to that. So what Tom is speaking to really is try and see how we can continue on this journey. I don't know what it's going to, I like Daniel's uncertainty. I use the phrase the busker. I'm a busker and an orchestra. I think sometimes the busker is much more important. So I like to be a busker myself sometimes. I don't make any money. But I suppose what we're trying to do is to see what we might do next. And what we're trying to do is leverage the best from the resources which we have. I know we don't live in a world where money is actually easy available, but we're trying to do the best with what we can. So what Tom has been doing, and the team have been doing, and all the group have been doing is actually look at what we might do next year as opposed to what we've done last year. And it's written there for you. What upgrades you'd like to see in general in centrally booked rooms. We're focusing again on centrally booked rooms. The review of UCC classroom technology was undertaken. Tom did a survey of that. Same kind of things emerging, I think, really. That would be nothing unusual in there, I guess. And what we try and do is to keep the momentum, what we call the next gen. It's just a brand. I don't know what that means actually, other than trying to look at spaces from a different lens and different supportive technology. And we would like to get some ideas open next week. So we send out an email, all this without an email, to open up some possibilities again, to see what might come up on board. And then what we do is we try and work through with you, with Mark's team and with Jared's team and other teams to see what might be possible within the constraints of budget, but also the constraints of time. Over a particular part of the year, where it might seem there might actually be 30 or 40 rooms in the summer. It's not that easy actually. From a logistic point of view, the usual kind of barriers and constraints to that, health and safety, teams, tendering, all the usual kinds of things. But nonetheless, what we want to do is to let people feel part of some real change. And I think we're beginning to see some real significant evidence of that. I think managing coming out of a recession is just as important as managing when you're in one. Most of us think we're coming out of one now. So that requires a real different change in mindset and how we might get the best value but also do some really exciting things, and we're going to try and do that. So what we'll do then is we'll ask you to think about what you'd like to do next in the centrally booked rooms, looking at the teaching learning spaces committee. Then we'll look at these in 2018 and then publish a plan together with Mark's team and the team from AVMs, Jared, colleagues, Killian and others across the institution, with a view to try and change the world, because that's what matters. Change our world so we make the students' world a better place. Thomas, is there anything else you want to add into that?
No, that's it. I mean, all of the videos from today, Stephen's slides as well, and
I tweeted a lot of the things that certainly get onto Twitter and you'll see it and stuff.
We'll put all those together and they'll be available to you. This is a conversation. So last year when we launched this, really it was a series of conversations that happened afterwards. People came to talk to us, and we talked to Buildings in the States, and we talked to AVMs. So we'd like to see that collaboration happen. It's been very rich. I think we've achieved a lot this year. So I think we're looking forward to doing more of the same things, but on a more general scale across the university next year.
And I think, just not to overcook it, but I think actually, I come from a background of ecology, and one of the things I've learned over the years that the language we use is important actually, that we don't disarm people, that there's a kind of mutual respect for the disciplines that are coming to bear on this, and actually try, what Dana said, to improvise and try some experiments. But it does require a particular mindset, and I think we're really lucky that the critical mass of that mindset and momentum is really building. And I certainly got enormously inspired, Stephen, by what you showed today, because that's what I want to see is what's the possibilities, because I think it's only when we can see possibilities, we might realise some of them. I'm not sure how we realise any of them, but at least we know how we're failing if we don't, which is equally important. So it just remains for me to say Mila Buika, so thank you very much. Can I particularly thank Tom and Maya and our team who pulled all this together. These things don't happen by chance, so Tom, to you and your team, thank you so much. To all our speakers, my colleagues and friends who have all come on the journey with us, and sometimes with a healthy skepticism, actually, that's kind of a good thing. But let's keep on trying to change the world. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.